She came screaming up the gravel drive like a storm breaking over the mountain. Her voice cut through the quiet of the pines, sharp, accusing, demanding. "Open this door right now. I need to inspect this property immediately." My wife and I froze in the cabin's front room, staring at each other. The weekend had been peaceful until that moment, wood smoke still curling from the stone chimney, sunlight spilling through the tall windows. Now all of it shattered by Karen's voice, the self-proclaimed HOA watchdog who had decided we didn't belong here. I could feel the anger rising in me, but beneath it something else, fear. What gave her the right to storm onto our land like this? What did she expect to find? I glanced at my wife. She was calm in a way I could never be. Her hand brushed mine, steady, grounding, as Karen's pounding fists echoed against the cabin door. "You think you can hide from the HOA?" Karen shouted, her words dripping with authority she didn't really have. "I know what you're doing in there. I'll write you up and you'll regret it." Every instinct in me screamed to throw that door open, to end her tirade with the truth, but something in my wife's eyes stopped me. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Wait." The pounding grew louder, more desperate, her shrill voice carrying into the stillness of the forest. The birds had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, listening. It was as if the whole mountain was holding its breath. I had to ask myself, why now? Why today? We had followed every rule, every guideline, even ones that made no sense. And yet Karen, with her clipboard and her fury, had made it her mission to break us. Then, just when I thought the cabin door might splinter beneath her fists, my wife walked calmly across the room. She didn't rush. She didn't flinch. She opened the drawer in the old oak desk and pulled out a single folded paper. When she turned back to me, her eyes burned with quiet fire. "She's about to learn something," she whispered. I didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. What was she holding? Why was she so certain? But before I could ask, she unlatched the heavy door and swung it open. Karen nearly stumbled inside, her mouth twisted in fury, her clipboard raised like a weapon. But then she froze. My wife didn't argue, she didn't shout back. She simply held out the paper, steady, unshaking. "This," my wife said, her voice calm as the river stones outside, "is a warrant." The silence that followed was heavier than Karen's rage had ever been. For a long moment, her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at the paper as if it were fire, as if it burned the authority right out of her. I could see it in her eyes, that sudden flash of doubt, the recognition that she had pushed too far, that she had tried to wield power she didn't actually have. For once, she wasn't the hunter. She was the one caught. I felt something shift inside me then, a lesson I didn't expect. Sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it isn't about fists or fury. It's about patience. It's about knowing when to let silence speak louder than shouting ever could. Karen lowered her clipboard, her voice breaking into a whisper. Where did you get that?" But my wife only stared at her, unblinking. The paper trembled in Karen's line of sight, the truth undeniable. The mountain was quiet again, but it wasn't peace this time. It was the silence before something bigger, something inevitable. And in that stillness, I realized this was only the beginning. Karen's face told a story she could never hide. One second she had been a storm, a wall of noise and authority, convinced she could walk into our lives and tear them apart. The next, she was a shadow of herself, frozen by the sight of that warrant in my wife's hand. Her lips trembled, her voice cracking. This isn't possible. You can't have that." I watched her eyes dart back and forth, searching for some kind of escape, some last shred of power. But the mountains don't lie, and neither did the paper in my wife's hand. I had never seen Karen look so small. And yet she didn't back down completely. People like her rarely do. Instead, she tried to twist the silence, filling it with whatever scraps of authority she thought she had left. "You think this scares me?" she spat, though her voice betrayed her. "You think one piece of paper can erase the rules of this community? I am the rules." Her words echoed through the cabin doorway, but this time they didn't cut like before. They felt hollow, like a hammer striking air. I felt something new stirring inside me, a realization. Karen wasn't as powerful as she wanted us to believe. She was just louder, and loud doesn't always mean strong. My wife didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply stepped closer, the warrant held high, and said in that calm, steady tone that could silence a battlefield, "You have no power here. This warrant says otherwise." The air shifted. Even Karen felt it. I wanted to step in to add my voice to shout the truth at her, but I stopped myself. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about dignity, about letting Karen see that the mountain didn't bend to her rules, no matter how many times she screamed. Karen's face turned red, then pale. She tried to glance over her shoulder as if the trees might give her backup, as if the shadows would agree with her story. But there was no one. Only the endless forest and the quiet weight of her own lies pressing down. She muttered something under her breath, words I couldn't catch, and took a stumbling step backward. It was almost pathetic, watching the fire drain out of her, replaced by something colder, fear. That was the moment I understood. Karen wasn't just fighting us. She was fighting something inside herself, something desperate, something she was trying to hide. But still, she refused to give in. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice thinner now, more desperate than commanding. "People like you never last up here. The HOA always wins." She turned, her footsteps crunching angrily against the gravel path as she retreated back toward her shiny SUV parked at the edge of the drive. The silence she left behind was heavier than before, pressing against the walls of the cabin, pressing against my chest. I closed the door slowly, almost expecting her to come pounding on it again. But she didn't. The storm had passed for now. Inside, the fire crackled, steady and warm, like it had never been disturbed. My wife placed the warrant back into the desk drawer, her face calm, her hands steady. I stared at her, unable to hold back the question burning inside me. "Where did you even get that? How long have you been holding on to it?" She looked at me with that quiet strength she always carried, the kind that said more than words ever could. And then she smiled, just barely. "Sometimes," she whispered, "you prepare for storms long before the clouds ever gather." Her words sank into me like stones in deep water, and for the first time since moving into this cabin, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt trust. But still, my mind couldn't let go of Karen's last words. The HOA always wins. What did she mean by that? Why did it sound less like a threat and more like a warning? I didn't know it then, but this was only the opening move in a game Karen had been planning far longer than we realized. She had secrets, deep ones, buried under layers of rules and lies. And she wasn't done with us, not even close. That night, as the mountain sky filled with stars and the silence settled in, I lay awake beside my wife, staring at the dark beams of the cabin ceiling. I could still hear Karen's voice, hissing through the quiet like a snake in the grass. The HOA always wins. But something inside me whispered back, stronger, clearer. "Not this time." The mountain was quiet the next morning, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that feels staged, like the world is holding its breath because something is about to happen. I stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee, the steam curling in the crisp air. The gravel drive was empty, no SUV, no Karen. But I knew she was out there, circling like a wolf, waiting for her chance to strike again. The words still echoed in my head. The HOA always wins. Why did she sound so certain? What did she know that we did? My wife joined me, her hand brushing mine as she sipped her tea. She didn't say a word, but her eyes scanned the tree line the way a soldier studies a battlefield. Calm, controlled, ready. I realized then she wasn't just prepared for Karen. She was prepared for something bigger. I asked her again quietly, "What aren't you telling me?" But before she could answer, the sound of tires crunching on gravel shattered the morning. Not one car this time, 3, black SUVs, polished, expensive. They pulled up side by side, blocking the drive like some kind of checkpoint. My stomach twisted. This wasn't Karen acting alone anymore. This was organized. This was planned. The doors opened almost in unison, and men in suits stepped out, clipboards in hand, badges gleaming on their jackets. They looked official, but too polished, too rehearsed. I had seen this kind of performance before. Back in the city when scammers dressed like inspectors, preying on people's fear of authority. Karen stepped out last. Her face was no longer flushed with rage. She was calm now, cold, calculated, the look of someone who thought they'd already won. "You thought a single warrant would stop us," she called out, her voice sharp against the mountain air. "That paper means nothing against this." She motioned toward the suited men, as if unveiling her army. My wife didn't move. She just stood there, her tea still in her hand, watching, waiting. Her silence unnerved even me, but I trusted it. She knew something I didn't. One of the men stepped forward, flipping open his clipboard. "We're here to conduct a full compliance inspection of this property. Any resistance will result in immediate fines and possible seizure." His tone was robotic, rehearsed. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but anger boiled inside me instead. Seizure? Of our land. Of the cabin we had built with our own hands. I stepped forward, my voice sharp. "On whose authority?" Karen's smile widened. "The HOA." For a moment the forest seemed to close in, the weight of their presence suffocating. My wife finally set her cup down on the porch rail and reached for the desk drawer just inside the cabin. My heart pounded. Was she going to bring the warrant again? Would it even matter? But she didn't pull out paper this time. She pulled out a phone. Calmly, deliberately, she began to record. Karen's eyes narrowed, the smile faltering. "What do you think you're doing?" My wife didn't answer. She didn't need to. The camera lens glared back at them like an unblinking eye. Proof, evidence, the one thing Karen couldn't twist with her shouting or bury with her rules. The suited men shifted uncomfortably, their rehearsed confidence cracking. One of them cleared his throat, muttered something about checking protocol, and glanced nervously toward Karen. That was when I saw it, the truth flickering across her face. These men weren't government officials. They weren't inspectors. They were hers, paid, staged, pretending. And she had been caught. For a moment no one moved. The forest held its breath again. Then Karen snapped, her voice shrill and desperate. "Stop recording, you don't have permission." My wife's voice was steady, calm, cutting through Karen's chaos like a blade. "You don't need permission to record criminals." The words hit harder than any shout could. The men froze. Karen's face twisted, caught between rage and fear. And in that moment I understood something powerful. People like Karen thrive on silence, on intimidation. But when the truth is exposed to the light, they crumble. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Her eyes told me everything. She wasn't done. She would come back, harder, sharper, more dangerous. As the SUVs reversed down the drive, Karen's gaze locked on ours, burning with a promise. "This isn't over." And deep down, I knew she was right. The night after Karen brought her fake inspectors, the mountain didn't feel the same. Every creak of the cabin made me sit up straight. Every flicker of shadow outside the window felt like eyes watching us. My wife stayed calm, but I could see it in her posture, in the way her shoulders held tension even when she smiled. She knew this wasn't finished. And she was right. 2 days later, an envelope appeared nailed to our front gate. No knock, no car in sight, just a single sheet of paper hammered into the wood like some kind of warning. I tore it free, my hands shaking as I unfolded it. It was a violation notice. According to the HOA, our cabin did not comply with community appearance standards. They claimed the roofline was unauthorized, the firewood stacked improperly, and even the color of our shutters unapproved. It was laughable, absurd, but at the bottom of the letter, the words weren't funny at all. Failure to correct these violations within 14 days will result in legal action, including possible forfeiture of property. Forfeiture, that single word turned my blood cold. I stormed inside, the paper crumpling in my fist. "This is insane. They can't do this. We built everything by code, by their own rules." My wife didn't answer right away. She unfolded the notice, smoothing it across the kitchen table, her eyes scanning every word. Finally, she looked up, and what I saw in her gaze scared me more than the paper itself. "This isn't just about us," she said quietly. "Karen's using the HOA like a weapon. She's making an example out of us." Her words lingered in the air. An example. I thought back to the neighbors we'd seen when we first moved here. The families that used to wave, the retired couple that once brought us pie. Lately, their doors had stayed closed, their eyes averted when we passed. Had Karen already broken them? Were we next? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the fire dying low, the violation notice burning holes into my thoughts. Every line of it felt like a chain tightening around our cabin, around our lives. At some point, I heard footsteps on the porch. My heart leapt. I rose quietly, moving to the window, and there she was, Karen. Alone this time, standing at the edge of the porch, her face half lit by the moon. She didn't knock, she didn't shout. She just stared at the door like she could see through it, like she was daring me to come outside. Then she whispered something I almost didn't hear. "You can't win." And just like that, she was gone, swallowed by the trees. I stayed frozen at the window, the words crawling into my bones. You can't win. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was anger, maybe exhaustion, maybe just the sheer weight of being pushed too far. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her destroy us. The next morning, my wife made a choice that surprised me. She didn't argue with the violation notice. She didn't crumple it up like I had. She called an attorney. And that's when I realized she had been preparing for this long before I ever suspected. She had documents, records, receipts. She knew the laws better than Karen ever could. She had built a wall of truth, brick by brick, waiting for the day someone tried to break us. When the attorney picked up, my wife's voice was calm, steady, professional. She explained everything: the harassment, the fake inspectors, the violations that made no sense. And as I listened, something incredible happened. For the first time since Karen had stormed onto our land, I felt hope. Still, I couldn't shake Karen's words, "You can't win." Because deep down, I knew people like her never played fair. She wasn't just after our cabin. She wanted control, and people like Karen don't stop until they're forced to. That night, as I sat on the porch staring at the stars, I whispered something into the dark, not to Karen, not even to my wife, just to myself. "We'll see." The letter from the attorney arrived faster than I expected. A thick envelope, heavy with paper, slid under our door by courier one gray morning. My wife opened it carefully, her face unreadable as she spread the documents across the dining table. Legal jargon filled the pages, stamped with bold headers. HOA v. homeowner. Karen had escalated. She wasn't just sending threats anymore. She had filed official action, dragging us into a fight we never wanted. My hands shook as I scanned the accusations: unauthorized construction, violation of appearance standards, failure to comply with HOA directives. Lies, every single one of them. But in black ink on white paper, they looked real. That was Karen's weapon, illusion disguised as authority. I slammed my fist on the table. This is insane. They can't prove any of this. My wife stayed calm, flipping through the pages like she was searching for something. And then she found it. A clause buried deep in the paperwork. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "They didn't expect anyone to read this closely," she whispered. I leaned over her shoulder, scanning the section she pointed out. And there it was, a contradiction, a clause that voided their claim if the homeowner had prior approval documents. Documents we already had. Documents Karen must have hoped we'd lost. For the first time in days, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. Maybe we could fight this. Maybe we had a chance. But just as quickly, doubt crept in. Karen wasn't careless. She wouldn't have let something like this slip without a backup plan, and sure enough, the phone rang that evening. I answered, and her voice slithered through the line, calm, calculated. "Do you really want to drag this out?" she asked. "Lawyers are expensive, courts are exhausting. The HOA always wins. You could save yourself the trouble. Just sign over the cabin, walk away, and spare yourself the pain." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "We're not going anywhere." Her laugh was low, cold. "We'll see." Then she hung up. I stood there in the silence, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. And for the first time, I wondered if she was right. Could we really fight her? Could we outlast her? The court date came faster than I was ready for. We drove down the mountain to the county courthouse, the cabin shrinking behind us in the rearview mirror. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy, stale, filled with whispers of other lives on trial. Karen was already there, sitting smugly at the plaintiff's table, her hair perfectly in place, her suit sharp and immaculate. She looked less like a neighbor and more like a predator waiting for the kill. When the judge entered, everyone stood. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about dignity, about survival. Karen's lawyer spoke first, his voice smooth, confident. He laid out their claims as if they were undeniable truths, violations, fines, noncompliance. His words painted us as careless, reckless, unfit to be part of the community. Then it was our turn. Our attorney rose, calm and deliberate. He didn't match the other lawyers' theatrics. He didn't need to. He laid down the facts, approvals signed years ago, receipts, photographs, every detail documented. One by one, he dismantled their accusations like pulling threads from a frayed sweater. Karen's smile faltered. I watched her grip her pen tighter, her jaw clench. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, but he kept glancing at the judge, clearly uneasy. And that's when it hit me. Karen had built her empire on fear, not truth, and fear crumbles under scrutiny. Still, she wasn't done. When it was her turn to speak, she stood, her voice sharp, dripping with false righteousness. She painted us as outsiders, troublemakers, dangerous to the order of the community. Her words weren't about rules anymore. They were about control. I looked at the judge, searching his face, praying he could see through her performance. And though he gave nothing away, I noticed something, a flicker of impatience, a glance at the stack of evidence on our side. The hearing ended without a ruling. The judge would review the documents and issue a decision later. Karen walked past us as she left, her perfume sharp, her voice low. This is just the beginning. I'll bury you in paperwork until you beg me to stop. For a moment, doubt clawed at me again. Could we endure this? Could we fight her endless storm? But then I looked at my wife. Calm, steady, unbroken, she met Karen's gaze with something stronger than anger, resolve. And I realized, Karen might have the HOA, the lawyers, the fake authority, but we had something she didn't. The truth. And truth, once unleashed, has a way of burning through every lie. The waiting was the worst part. Days dragged by after the hearing, the judge's decision still hanging somewhere above us like a storm cloud refusing to break. Each morning I'd walk out to the mailbox, half hopping, half dreading what I might find. And every time my stomach would tighten when I saw Karen's shadow still lingering in our lives. At first it was small things. Trash cans mysteriously knocked over. Our driveway blocked by unfamiliar cars that sped away the moment I approached. A dead animal left at the edge of our property, a cruel symbol rotting in the sun. But then it escalated. One night around midnight, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. I slipped from bed, heart pounding, and peeked through the curtain. There she was, Karen, standing in the glow of our porch light, holding her phone up, recording our cabin like we were criminals under surveillance. I opened the door, ready to confront her, but my wife's hand stopped me. "Don't," she whispered. "That's what she wants." So we let her film, her shadow stretching across the wood as if marking territory that wasn't hers. And when she finally left, disappearing into the dark, I realized something chilling. Karen wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to break us before the decision ever came. The next morning, word spread through the community like wildfire. Neighbors who once waved now avoided us. Conversations stopped when we walked into the general store. I caught whispers, troublemakers, outsiders, lawsuit. Karen had poisoned the well. She was rewriting the story before the judge could even speak. It hurt more than I expected. We came here for peace, for a chance to start fresh in the mountains. And now it felt like the whole world was turning against us. That night, my wife sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes steady even as exhaustion lined her face. She pushed a stack of folders toward me, documents, photos, receipts, evidence of everything. "We don't bend," she said softly. "She thrives on fear, but fear only works if we let it." Her words lit something inside me, but before I could respond, headlights swept across the window. Another car pulling into our drive. I tensed, ready for Karen again, but this time it wasn't her. It was one of our neighbors, an older man, shoulders hunched, his hands stuffed in his jacket. He knocked softly, almost guiltily, and when we opened the door, he whispered, "I shouldn't be here, but you need to know." He glanced over his shoulder before continuing. Corinne's been telling everyone you're criminals, that you forged documents, that you're dangerous. She said the HOA is going to seize your place, and she told people not to get involved. My stomach sank. It wasn't enough for her to drag us into court. She was trying to erase our reputation, to isolate us so we'd be too weak to fight back. But then the man leaned closer, his voice trembling. Thing is, I believe you. I've seen her do this before. Other families, they left. You're the first ones to fight. For a moment, I felt the weight of every decision pressing down on me. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were standing where others had fallen. After he left, my wife and I sat in silence, the fire casting shadows across the walls. I could hear the mountain winds outside, whispering through the trees like an old truth. Corinne thought fear would win. She thought lies could outlast truth. But as I looked at my wife, calm even in the chaos, I realized something deeper. This wasn't just a fight for our cabin. It was a fight for every voice Corinne had silenced before us. And no matter how long it took, we weren't going to be her next victims. The mountain doesn't bend to storms, it outlasts them. And so would we. The envelope arrived on a gray Thursday morning. Official seal. County court stamp. My hands shook as I carried it into the cabin, the weight of it pressing against my chest like a stone. For days we had waited, haunted by Corinne's whispers, poisoned by her lies, wondering if the system would see the truth or swallow her performance whole. I laid the envelope on the table. My wife looked at it calmly, though I saw the tension in her eyes. Neither of us spoke. For a moment, even the mountain seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she slid her finger under the seal and opened it. The decision was short, direct, clear. Case dismissed. The HOA's claims had no standing. Our approvals were valid. Their evidence insufficient. The judge's words were almost cold in their simplicity, but to me they felt like fire, like sunlight breaking through after a storm. We had won. I laughed half in relief, half in disbelief, as I pulled my wife into my arms. For the first time in weeks, the weight lifted. The cabin was ours. The mountain was ours. We had stood against Corinne's empire of lies, and the truth had held. But the celebration was short-lived. Because when the news spread, Corinne didn't disappear. She didn't shrink back into silence. She came to our gate that evening, her SUV parked crooked, her face pale but burning with something more dangerous than rage. She stood in the gravel, her voice shaking, not with weakness but with fury barely contained. You think this changes anything? A piece of paper doesn't protect you. This isn't over. The HOA always wins. Her words rang hollow now, stripped of the authority she once wielded. But still, I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't going to stop. Not until she was broken, or we were. Neighbors began to gather at the edges of the drive, drawn by the shouting. Some of them had believed her lies, avoided us, treated us like outcasts. But now, with the ruling public, I could see the doubt spreading across their faces. The cracks in her empire were showing. My wife stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the night. The court has spoken. Your lies are finished. Corinne's lips trembled. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating, until finally she spat on the gravel, turned, and stormed back to her SUV. The tires spun in the dirt as she roared away, leaving only dust and tension hanging in the air. The neighbors lingered, whispering among themselves. Some avoided our eyes, ashamed. Others gave small nods, silent acknowledgments that maybe they had been wrong. For the first time, Corinne's grip on them was slipping. That night, the fire crackled warm in the cabin, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. We had won the case, but I couldn't shake the image of her face, the fury, the desperation. She was unraveling, but unraveling people are dangerous. My wife sat across from me, the glow of the flames reflecting in her eyes. She'll try again, she said softly. People like her don't walk away quietly. I knew she was right. Winning in court hadn't ended the war. It had cornered Corinne. And a cornered predator doesn't retreat, it lashes out. As the wind howled outside and the shadows stretched long against the cabin walls, I realized the fight wasn't over. The worst was still to come. But deep down I felt something new, stronger than fear, stronger than anger. Resolve. We had faced her lies. We had survived her storms. And when she came again, as I knew she would, we'd be ready. Because the mountain doesn't bow, it stands. And so would we. It happened sooner than I expected. 2 weeks after the ruling, just as the mountain was beginning to feel calm again, flashing red and blue lights lit up our road. For a moment, I thought they were coming for us. Another one of Karen's schemes, another false report. But this time, the truth had finally caught up to her. The deputies' voices echoed down the street as they surrounded her house. Neighbors peeked out from porches, whispering, watching as the woman who once lorded over them with clipboard and venom now stood trembling on her own lawn. Karen tried to fight it. Of course she did. Her voice shrieked through the evening air, claiming conspiracies, screaming that she was the victim, that the HOA was being sabotaged. But the warrant in the deputy's hand spoke louder than she ever could. Fraud, forgery, harassment, misuse of funds. The list rolled off like stones crashing down a mountain. I watched from our gate, the cold air biting my skin, my wife's hand steady in mine. There was no triumph in my chest, no celebration, only a deep, quiet release, as though the mountain itself had finally exhaled. Karen's knees buckled when the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Her scream turned into a broken whimper, the sound of a person realizing the empire they built was nothing but sand, washed away by the tide of truth. The neighbors didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stood in silence, the spell broken. For years they had followed her, feared her, believed her. Now, with the sirens washing over her sobbing figure, they saw her for what she really was, a bully dressed as a leader, hollow beneath the noise. As the SUV pulled away, dust curling in the headlights, I thought back to the first day she marched up our porch, screaming, demanding to inspect what wasn't hers. I remembered the way her shadow had fallen long across the boards of our cabin, how small we had felt then. And now she was gone. That night the mountain was quiet again. No pounding fists at our door. No letters slid under it. Just wind in the pines and the soft crackle of our fire. My wife leaned into me, her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time we felt safe. But safety didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace earned through scars. Because Karen had taught us something, though she never meant to. She taught us how fragile truth can feel when lies are loud. She showed us how fear spreads faster than fact, how a single voice can poison a whole neighborhood. But she also proved something greater, that when you stand long enough, when you refuse to bend, the storm passes. The mountain doesn't bow, and neither did we. Sometimes karma doesn't come with fire or fury. Sometimes it comes with silence. The quiet closing of a cell door, the slow fading of a voice that once shouted too loud. And in that silence, we found something stronger than victory. We found home. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.